Welcome to Living a Life by Design. It's the journey back to you and living 365 days of purpose with your host, Esther Graham. Did you know your accountability and possibility is by design? God designed a phenomenal life for you, gave you the gift of choice. Esther helps empower you to discover and pursue the purpose that is already in you. Are you ready to look at yourself and see your future? Then get back to what is really important in life and get in alignment with your true self. Stay tuned to Living a Life by Design. Journey back to you and start living 365 days of purpose with your host, Esther Graham. It all starts now.
Hello, 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 hello. Good afternoon, and welcome to Living a Life by Design. It's a journey back to you and living 365 days of purpose. I'm so super excited that you have made the decision to join me this afternoon. And even if you are not on live, and whoever is looking at the replay, I'm so glad that you're taking the time to discover how we can all live a life by design. So this afternoon, I have my very special guest. I have to tell you and take my time and introduce him because he's a very special person to me. And he agreed to do this interview. And I have to tell you guys, if you know who he really is, you know that he does not like to be interviewed. And I've got to, it's like pulling, how do they say, like pulling teeth, to get him to come on an interview. But he said, sure, I will do it. And listen, why this is really important is because he just just a couple weeks ago had a very important surgery. And yet he said, I'm still going to do this. And so thank you so much, my very own husband, John Graham. I just want to welcome you to our podcast, or my podcast, Living a Life by Design. How are
Thank
you?
you. Thank you, Esther. I am doing wonderful. I'm wonderful. And thank you so much for taking such good care of me.
Now, y'all, if we were in the same room, I would be giving him like a little. We're in separate rooms. But today, I love our discussion we're going to have today, which is really our spiritual journey, right? And how it impacts, or really our spiritual life, and how it impacts the life that we live overall. This subject is really important for me because for me, having a spiritual foundation is really important. Our discussion today isn't about religion or religiosities or anything like that. It's really having a spiritual foundation and really focusing on our spiritual wellness, which I think is so important to our mental being, our physical being, our emotional, everything. It's really a part of what makes us a whole person. And so today I'd like to really begin the discussion is on the importance of that spiritual foundation and how it plays an important role in this journey we call life. And so what I'd like to first tell us what you do in the world, how you show up in the world, and then let's get started on this conversation.
Yeah, so I'd like to say that I have a vocation and I have occupation. And not going to so much talk about my occupation today, but my vocation is your vocation is what you love, what you live and love to do. So that's what I'm all about. And your occupation is what you do to live, put food on the table, whatever the case may be. My vocation is I am a pastor of a comfortable congregation, I like to call it. And I love the Lord Jesus Christ with all my heart. I love people. I love seeing people change and their lives transform sometimes before your very eyes. So that I do sell real estate as well, a realtor. But again, that's my occupation. My vocation is pastor.
So and you're also retired military. So let's not leave
yes,
that
and
out. Yeah.
yeah, and I guess to speak on today's subject as it pertains to my military career and a spiritual foundation, not just a religious foundation, but a spiritual foundation, because You can go through and go through all the forms and all the rituals and everything else like that, but there's no relationship, then it's that much less effective, I should say. So I am a veteran and veteran of war as well, with post-traumatic stress disorder, right? And for a long time, I had no idea. But a portion of that I attribute to my spiritual foundation and strength, because there were a lot of people that, I saw a lot, did a lot. There were a lot of people that saw a lot and did, saw some of the same things, did some of the same things that I did, and I couldn't understand why they were losing their minds. I hate to put it in that sense, but that's what it appeared to be. And I always attributed it to the fact that I had a place to take all of my cares. I had a place, I would pray, and I would talk to God about, what was going on and what I was feeling. But then oftentimes people aren't talking to anybody
That's
about
right.
what's going on. So if I didn't have that relationship with God, I would probably have the same outcome as some of my comrades did.
I
Right.
like what you said, that this isn't about religion. It's really about relationships. So we're not having a religious conversation today. What we are having is a spiritual conversation, a
Yeah.
conversation about spiritual wellness, and
Yes.
how being spiritually well could really serve as a firm foundation to wherever you go and whatever you do in your life. And
Mhm.
so being, of course, John and I have been married for 35 years. And so whenever he talks about being a vet, I always like to jump in and say, we are vets, right? But but on a serious note, yeah, he's a vet. And so looking at him go through PTSD and really not even knowing the height of it, how much it was really affecting in every area of our lives. And I think what we're going to do at some point down the road in one of the podcasts, we're going to talk about PTSD and how do you handle it, how do you work through it, and just as that spouse, that person, uh, that caregiver, or whatever name that you may have, deals with it on the other side as well, because there's two different perspective on how, not just the person who has PTSD, but also that spouse, that caregiver who's living with that person, that child, that daughter, that son, who's got, with
Mhm.
has to deal with the PTSD. But what
Right.
I have found in our relationship is that yes, the spiritual foundation, being spiritually well,
Mm.
is important. Not just having that belief in God and having a conversation with God, but also having that belief in yourself and having a conversation with someone else. There's absolutely nothing wrong with
Right.
going to a therapist, going to therapy, getting a coach, anything, having someone in a safe space where you can talk about your emotions and how you're feeling. And I think sometimes what happens, and correct me if I'm wrong, what happens is that many times we will just only focus on that spiritual aspect of our lives, when
Mhm.
in reality we deal with reality. So that spiritual piece, it's a foundation, but it's not the end all. The foundation is something that's set, it's firm. So I know I grew up, y'all know from the first show I did, I'm a PK, which means I'm a preacher's kid, I'm a pastor's kid. So
Right.
I grew up, in church. I've got that foundation, right? But I also live a life in reality.
Mhm.
Right. And so, in all of that, embedded in all of that, is my spiritual journey and my spiritual wellness, with my faith and with everything that I do. So how is that, for you, from your perspective in dealing with PTSD and with everything else? How is our spiritual life
Mhm.
a great foundation, wherever your spirituality may be at this point, to setting the course for our journey?
Okay. So I like to think about Moses and his father-in-law, and again, not to just be religious, but it's a true and a really good story how Moses Moses suffered from PTSD, after bringing the children of Israel out of Egypt. He suffered from PTSD in a sense, because he had fights, he killed, he killed someone, and and so on and so forth, and all these things kind of add up, and he's trying to manage these millions of people, and his father-in-law said, "Man," he said, "if you keep that up," he says, "I know you hear from God. You're a great leader. You're
Yeah.
all of those things, right?" And he said, "So you got your spiritual walk on lock, right? But now you need to integrate it and to ensure that you can, that you're around longer. So these things are in place." So he said, "You don't have to bear this whole load by yourself. You can delegate. You have people that you can assign to this and assign to that." So he could have been, what I call, because I class spirituality in three categories. One, you're spiritual. Two, you're super spiritual. Three, you're spooky spiritual, right? And spooky spiritual, nobody really likes, because you really get nothing out of it. It's like a show, and it's
Mm.
scary.
Yeah.
Not scary in the sense that you have a fear of God, but it's scary because it causes you to question, if spirituality is good or not. Right?
Yeah.
Super spirituality, you've got people that are super spiritual, born spiritual, born with a relationship according to them with God, and everything else, that falls under that. So they have a tendency to be able to go through things, to be able to endure things, but not necessarily help others.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's the spiritual, it's a constant walk. It's a constant walk with God. Some people say, constant walk with the universe, or higher being. I
Source.
call him, yeah, exactly. I call him God, right? I call him God. And I'm a pastor, and I believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. And this is my relationship with God through Jesus Christ that allows me to be here now. Okay. So you can very well try to be superheroes, right? You
Yeah.
think about, most of us have seen Marvel movies and things like that, and superheroes normally are reluctant to accept the responsibility of the power that they have. Normally reluctant to accept, okay, I'm just going to keep this undercover, it's not going to let anybody know. But then, because of their foundation, because of what's really in them, they can't just stand by idly and allow things to happen, to people in their lives, to people that can't defend or take care of themselves, or whatever the case may be, and they reluctantly embrace, right? But once they embrace it, then comes the cape, then comes the mask and everything else like that, right? So
Let's stop for a quick second as we go to a break, and we'll be right back with some more powerful, enlightening conversation with John Graham. Welcome back, everyone. Today we are here with my very special guest, my life partner, John Graham, and we are discussing how our spiritual life, our spiritual wellness can impact the life that we live. It's a foundation. And we ended our last segment with speaking about, I think you said, when you're spiritual, I think, when you gave the three categories, I think the importance, the last one, when you're spiritual, for me, that means I've got a great, not a, yeah, I've got a great relationship. But it's a relationship, as with all relationship, that's continual. I have to work on that relationship. So
mhm,
when we're speaking about our spiritual wellness,
mhm,
right, just like our health wellness, our mental wellness,
exactly.
it's something that is continual. It's not something that we do one and done. It's like transformation.
It's a
Transformation.
lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle. It's not one and done.
Mhm.
It's a lifestyle. Your mental
Lifelong
wellness,
commitment.
exactly. Your health wellness, and so it is with your spiritual wellness. It becomes a lifestyle. And so many times I remember growing up, and when you'd say, oh, they're so spiritually minded, they're no heavenly good. And I'm like understanding that, as you grow up, it's like, what I used to think, what do they mean by that? But I understood it now. I understand it, well, long time ago, that sometimes we just become so spiritual that it's like, hey, can you come meet me at this level? And I honestly think that's what, when we're talking about spiritual wellness, is really being able to build that relationship, not just with God, but with each other and with others, expressing love and expressing all of these things, and basically being able to meet people where
Yeah.
they are. And so I love what you said about, your spirituality is building that relationship. For me, as of course, as you were married, I call him God. For me, that's God. And when I look at my own relationship, I just think that I'm a relationship builder, because I know that it doesn't matter who you are, where you came from, what you've done, what you haven't done. It really doesn't matter. God just really cares about you, and he cares about your spiritual wellness,
Right.
building that relationship that is constructible. So how do we begin to do that? How do we begin to have that, and beginning with a self-evaluation? What can we do?
Right. So everybody needs these three things. Everybody needs a mentor, a motivator, right, and a model.
Yeah,
And whether it be one person that that all of those are encompassed within, or whether it be many sources that you draw from to get your mentor, your model, and your motivator. You cannot effectively walk through this life without something to look to, someone to look to,
yeah,
someone
yeah,
to be accountable to, or as well as someone to again model yourself after. You don't have to try to be a cheap carbon copy of them, um, but it pays to be able to see someone and say, Mark, again, you mark someone that has accomplished, you mark someone that's doing well. And when it comes to your spirituality and your spiritual strengths, let's say for instance, you say, I want to get into shape. I want to get into shape physically. I want my health to be good. So you can go so far on your own, but
yeah,
then there are some things that you don't know about the body, kinesiology, nutrition, and all of these things that it would very well benefit you if you had a personal trainer, right?
yeah,
And that personal trainer keeps you accountable, knows some of the things that you need nutritionally, knows some of the things that you need physically, so they kind of guide you along, right? So then you continue to the point where, and sometimes this is how we get spiritually sometimes as well. Sometimes you get so far, you get so strong, you look so good, you feel like you don't need a trainer anymore.
yeah.
So
So
you go
true.
and go and go and go, and before you know it, you're back to
I'm
square
guilty of
one
that.
where you started before,
Yeah,
because you're not following the advice that the trainer gave you, because you cut off your relationship with the
yeah,
trainer,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
And
so
I get that.
spiritually, go ahead.
So with your spiritual, when you cut off that communication, right? Because some people think that, that when we're speaking of spiritual wellness, I want to keep saying that spiritual wellness, because many people will say, well, I'm spiritual well. So this is what I think. I think there's spiritual wellness, and I
Mhm.
think there's personal development, and
Right.
I think the two go hand in hand.
Mhm, mhm.
I think that when you go through personal development, this is what I believe. When you go through personal development, really going and doing self-evaluation of you, really looking at how you're doing in your inner world, then your spiritual wellness can begin to increase, because now you're in tune with you, which allows you to be even more in tune with God,
Right.
right? I've
Right.
seen it many times to where someone could really say, well, I'm spiritual. And I think that's great, but that doesn't mean that everything in your life is fixed and perfect. Am I right?
You're correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So bringing the two together, why? So we could be on that path to living that life by design. that life of purpose, going towards our destiny and having inner peace and joy and happiness, that no matter what comes our way, we've got that foundation. We're learning we've got the tools to personally uh, uh, personally go through a healing process, and then we're spiritually well. I don't know if I'm making sense. I hope I
Yeah,
am.
it makes a lot of
But it
sense.
all
Makes
comes together.
Yeah, yeah. So, spirituality is really a connection to someone deeper and greater than yourself. And I say someone, I don't say something, because inanimate objects to me are do nothing for me spiritually. They do nothing for me um, in any other way, shape, or in any shape or form. They're inanimate objects. They can do nothing, right? But when you have a connection with someone deeper than you are, someone greater than you are, and greater and deeper than anybody around you that looks like you in any way, shape, or form, and what I'm talking about in all of humanity, right? So they're greater than all of humanity. And when you have a connection that way, whether you can understand verbally or whether it's just kind of like a push, right?
Yeah.
They call it they call it an unction, a push from from the spirit, that from the spirit. But when you have a connection, you have an accountability that's higher than anybody around you. The morality, or everything that has to do with you being the best version of you, right? Is engulfed in that higher being. I call him God.
But you just said the best version of you, because we are always on a path to get the best version of ourselves. So when we're thinking about the spiritual part of it that
Mhm.
leads to all of it, kind of let's dive into that just a little bit more so we can have a clear understanding of what's the best version of ourselves when we're speaking about our spiritual well-being.
When we're talking about our spiritual well-being, there's if you will, if you're spiritually well, there's a calmness in you that kind of overcomes all the creation around you, everything that's happening around you, everything, every tragedy, all of those things. Not that you ignore those things, but it doesn't have a way. It that connection has a way of not allowing you to be pulled down and into those tragedies, so to speak. Again, not saying that you don't care. You may go work and build, rebuild houses. You may go, save the whales, or whatever the case may be. Whatever's in you to do about, because if you think about it, there are probably 300 million purposes that we could fight for every day, and have different purposes for 365 days a year. So we can't fight everyone's battle. We can't be everyone's battle. We can't be everyone's, for lack of a better word, savior. But what we can do is seek, that place of peace, that place of purity, the place to where we can go and be filled and know what our purpose is and going forward. And then we can direct that energy to where we know that purpose is, and then we can affect, and in some cases infect, hopefully in a good way, many other people.
Yeah, I think that our spiritual wellness is so important to when we're also outreaching, we're reaching out. Um, Part of that is reaching out to people who are not like us, not even may not even believe
Like,
like we may believe,
mhm.
but because we know that God has created all of us, and since He is a God of love, that where we can share our, and I think that's a part of spiritual wellness, is being able to say, you listen, we may have some disagreements in this area, or we may
Mhm.
not, or we may just not believe the same, but we are humanity together.
Right, right.
Right? We are
Mhm.
humanity together, and we are here to love and support each other. One of the things I honestly love about you um, is that, you and both of us, we have friends from all faith base. And I absolutely love that because we can sit and have conversations with anyone at any time, right? And so
Right.
I think that when you have a spiritual wellness, you can just meet people where they are, right? And
Mhm.
then you can have powerful, enlightening conversations,
Yeah.
about spirituality and about the stars, the bees, the sun, the moon, about that great restaurant, in
Right.
other words, you can just have really great conversation. Why? I think when you're spiritually well, you know who you are.
Mhm.
You know who you are. And so it doesn't matter if you're Muslim or you're Jewish or you're Christian or you're, whatever, and whatever the other denominations and religions may be. And it doesn't matter if you're saying, well, listen, I'm just a spiritual person. Well, talk
Mhm.
to me then about that. We're going to
Okay.
go for a break in just a minute, but real quick, in about 30 seconds, what does that sound like? I'm just a spiritual person. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, just spiritual, just just seeking to be, again, the best version of me that I possibly can be. Because if I'm giving you a carbon copy, I'm not giving you me,
Yeah, yeah,
and who I'm created to be, the person that I'm best set to be. And if my spirituality is strengthening, growing, or whatever the case may be, if I'm set in my spiritual life, then I know how to apply and what applies in every other walk of my life. May I get it right every time? Maybe not. But most of the time it's on point, and you're ready to be in a place, and and always in a place to learn, right?
right,
To
right,
be teachable. Always be set in a place to where, you know, you don't know everything, right?
yeah,
And in most cases, when we find out, degrees included, you think that you know everything, but it's just a degree of knowledge. Your higher being, God, the universe, right, has all that knowledge, right?
yeah, yeah.
So seeking to increase in that knowledge, the wisdom, the understanding, and then the application of all of those things.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with some more powerful conversation. Welcome back, everyone. Again, I'm here with John Graham, my wonderful husband. And so we have been having, I think it's been a powerful conversation on spirituality and how it affects our life. A very broad subject. We could have probably narrowed it down just a little bit more, but sometimes I like to go broad and then later, we come in and we narrow it down. But what I'd like to just kind of talk about a little bit more, we mentioned earlier about self-evaluation. And so when it comes to our spiritual life, I personally think that it's so important for us to do some self-evaluation.
Right.
Helps us
For
to
sure.
know who we are and where we are. And many times, I think self-evaluation can be difficult, especially if we're truly going to tell the truth about ourselves.
Mhm.
But when we do that, right, it leads us to such great spiritual wellness and becoming one with ourselves and becoming one with God. And I think it's just a powerful tool that really puts us on a path to, I like to say, rising and living in purpose. So, talk to us a little bit about self evaluation. How would you go about that? Give us
Okay.
like a steps.
So for me, um, our my pastor and mentor, Pastor Anthony Wallace, um, taught us that what we call the Shamgar principle. You start where you are, you use what you have, you do all that you can, and then you lead the results to God. So that's four. I'm sorry if it's not three, but start where you are. And the story goes that Shamgar, was a guy that he used an ox goad, which is a tool for farming, and turned it into a weapon to be able to defend. And it said he slew 800 men, right? With that. So the thing is, you start where you are. You have to evaluate where you are. where you've been, the place that you are now, and then have some sort of vision as to, where you want your life to be, right? So that's the first step. You start where you are. Take, introspective look at yourself, an honest look in the mirror. Michael Jackson said, I'm starting with the man in the mirror, asking him to change his ways, right? Clear message, right? And then you use what you have. Then you begin to evaluate, what tools do I have to move forward, right? When we're talking about our spirituality, obviously, it doesn't matter from what religious perspective you're looking at. Prayer is the key, right? So praying, so that's a tool that you have. Reading, to understand, the place that you are, to understand what you should be, praying and addressing, and all of those things. Um, so um, Other tools, and any other tools that you may have. You have people at your disposal, so to speak, to draw from, to get wisdom, to get understanding, right? And then once you get all of those things, you get all of those tools, and it says use what you have, right? Do all that you can. Then you begin to implement things, right? Based on what you've read, based on what you've heard in your hour of prayer, based on what's really pressing in your heart, and you begin to hear those things. From us, we hear those things from God, and then God says, move, we move, right? Just like that. And then,
Like that, when he moves, we move, just like that. Yeah.
just like that, right? Right. And then the last thing is, for us, leave the results to God. There are some things that are out of your control, right? So once you've taken those tools, and once you've gotten those tools, taken those tools, and then use them to the best of your ability, there's nothing more than that you can do. It's out of your hands. It's out of your control. So just allow, life to happen, so to speak, because it's not like you're allowing life to happen and you haven't done anything, but you've taken the necessary steps to get to where you are. Just wait for it to manifest.
So you start where you are, one, you begin to
Mhm.
self-evaluate and see, this
Mhm.
is where I am right now. And
Right.
you go through every area. This is where I'm in my spiritual life. This
Mhm.
is where I'm in my financial life, my
Right.
my physical life. In other words, starting where you are could be in every area of your life, right?
Exactly.
Today we're focusing on the spiritual
Spiritual,
aspect
yes.
of it as the foundation, but really starting there and moving out, right? And so you start where you are, and then you do everything you can. In other words, you're not sitting still, you're in action, you're doing
Mhm.
things, you're getting the tools. If you need to talk to a therapist, you get a coach, you take classes, you get your mentoring, all of those things. You're taking the action, and then you said the third would be leaving the results to God, right? And
That would be the fourth. So start
that's
where
the
you are,
start where you
right?
are.
Use what you have,
It's what you have, everything you have right now. Okay,
right?
got
Every tool that you have, right? Do all that you can with those tools,
it. Okay,
and then
great.
you leave the results to God.
The results to God. I absolutely love that, because at that last, the fourth tool, there's so many things that we don't control. And so what we don't control, we do have to release it, and we release it to God. When we release things, we find that things come to us when we release it. I have a good
Mhm.
friend of mine, Charcy, that says, if it's in God's plan, it's in my plan, right?
Mhm.
And I think a part of that is when we release things, you
Right.
know, is that, listen, I've did everything I can. I no longer control anything, right?
Mhm.
And by the way, there's so many things in life that we try to control that we don't control. We just have to release it and leave the results to God.
Right.
And as if it's in God's plan, it's in my plan,
Right.
right? That's great. Good
And what do
stuff.
you often say? I've heard you say, you control your inner,
Yeah.
right? Your inner world. The outer world you can't control. Things, you can't control when the planes are coming, when the birds are flying, and everything else, when the leaves fall, and all of you can't control those. But what you can control is how you feel. You can control what you say. You can control what you do, right? You can control when you pray. You can control how deep you're going to go into what you're into,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right?
you control that. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's that whole inner world that you control. So let me ask you one more question. Tell me, what does living by design mean to you and look like for you?
Okay. Well, living by design, really means that that I have an understanding that there is a purpose and a design for my life. And once I understand that there's a and let me interject this. There's no one on this earth that doesn't have a purpose and a design for their life. Many people will say, you're nothing, you're not going to be anything, or all of those things, and that's not true
Yeah,
because there is a design for your life. There is a design, and there is a purpose for you living. And some people need to hear that there's a purpose for you living because if you don't believe that, then you're subject to say, you know what, what's the use, right? But there is a use. There's a purpose. I may not be able to tell you that purpose, but you can find out by starting where you are, right? Using what you have, doing all that you can, and leaving the results to God. But I really believe that living a life by design is understanding that piece, embracing it. Like I said earlier, superheroes normally don't embrace their power or the responsibility of their power. Spider-Man's uncle told them, he said, with great power comes great responsibility. And sometimes the responsibility scares people off. I don't want to be responsible for people, coming out, for people going through detox or whatever the case may. I don't want to be responsible for that because that's hard. That's hard. But if that's your life and that's the design and your purpose, right? Once you embrace it and settle in, you'll be more effective than anyone else that you've seen, operate in that before. So it's just understanding that there is a purpose for you for your life, that it doesn't just happen, right? It takes you embracing again, understanding where you are, taking that look at yourself inwardly, outwardly, however, and then taking those tools and getting those tools, taking those tools and using them to the best of your ability, and knowing that you may never see it, but it does make a difference.
It does. Living a life by design and just being, I love when you said, it helps you to realize who you are,
Mhm.
right? When you can really come to terms with who you are and accepting who you are and loving who you are, you can begin to live that life by design. And I think a part of that too for me is not just only accepting who I am, loving who I am, but then accepting guidance from others, guidance from those who I trust.
Right.
Um, and also guidance in my spiritual life from Holy Spirit. I've got to
Mhm.
be guided, you
Right.
know, and that helps me in my living by design as I start where I am,
Mhm.
all that I use what I have, do
Do
all
all you can.
and
Leave
leaving,
the results.
releasing everything and
Right.
leaving the results to God. That is powerful and so important to living that life by design. It's God created us, and so I always say that from the very day we were knitted in the wombs of our mother, that we began living a life by design. And sometimes what happens, we get out of that because of life.
Right.
Life happens, y'all. And
Mhm.
so, but the thing about it is that we could always come back to it,
Right.
to always make that decision to say, you know what, let me get this together because I need to live my
Mhm.
life by design. I need to have a faith foundation or a spiritual foundation. I need to have great spiritual wellness that leads to mental wellness, that leads to physical, all of that. It's the whole person we're
Yeah.
talking about,
Yeah.
the
It
whole
all
person.
touches and it all spills over, and spiritually more so in all those areas, mentally, physically, emotionally, as it socially, whatever, your spiritual well-being spills into all of those areas, as it should. When David says, my cup runs over, right? That's what it is. It should run over, and it should spill into all of those areas, and really, really express who you are without the title, without the rank, without the position, without any of those things, right? If you had, if you were stripped down to, to nothing and put in a desert place, that it would still reveal who you really are.
Hey, listen, I 100%. I know before we take a quick break that my spiritual life, my spiritual foundation, my spiritual wellness is really has made me who I am today. It's my foundation. And
Right.
so it has caused me, I believe, to live a life by design because was always there, but I needed to find my path back to it. And again, I want to
Mhm.
say it's not one and done. This is a journey. It's a
Right.
marathon. It's not a
Right.
sprint. So I'm always working on
Yeah.
that piece. I'm always working on it. All right, let's take one more break and we will come right back as to close out with John Graham. Welcome back. Welcome back. I'm here again today with John Graham as we are discussing how our spiritual wellness, our spiritual life can really impact our life overall. As we're, listen, on the journey to discovering, the importance of having a strong spiritual wellness as a foundation and how, it comes together as we pursue our destiny, as we are, trying to reach inner peace and inner happiness, and as we're healing, from the hurts that we've gone through in life. Our spiritual wellness is so important to that. And so John, what I'd like for you to do now is just basically, tell us where, and anybody wants to go a little bit deeper, have a deeper conversation with you, where can they reach you? And of
Right.
course, and then I'll ask you to just give just a couple things before we leave everyone today.
Okay. So if you want to email me, or so it's John J O. No, I'm sorry. It's J Graham at Reset, RESET Church, CHURCHDE for Delaware.com. So J Graham at resetchurch.com, or you can find me at John Graham on Facebook, and
Jon Graham, not
Jon. I'm sorry, Jon space GRAHAM, and you can send me a message through Messenger, and or you can contact me at info at resetchurchde.com. So however
And
you.
listen, and it's not just about spirituality, but if you're a person that you may be struggling from PTSD, contact him, and he's got some important vital information that he can share with you. He's a great person to just talk and have a conversation. And I always say that to him because I've listened sometimes, and even when we're just having our casual conversations, it's just been so powerful to where they help me, and then it helps you give insight sometimes to what you may be experiencing. So make sure that you reach out to him, and even if it's to say, hey, just wanted to say hi. So
Yeah.
listen, everyone, I just wanted to also tell you to continue to join me every second and fourth Fridays at 11 a.m., 2 p.m., 11 a.m. Pacific and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for my Life by Design podcast. We've got several guests ready to come and talk to you about different areas of your life that all comes together for living a life by design. Also, jump on my website, www.fddwomen.com. There's a free gift there for you. There's a self-care guide. There's retreat information, all kinds of programs that's there for you. There's also a module called Created for More that will help you look to see that God did not create you to live a mediocre life. He created you to live a great life. So don't live a mediocre life. Don't just live a good life. Make a decision today to live a great, audacious, wonderful life, a life by design where good things are always coming to you. I'm so excited. I'm so glad that you joined us today, and I'm super excited to see you again. And listen, John, what would you like to share with us as we begin to end this session?
Again, just just go over this if you could, this recording, and remember those four things. Start where you are, do what you use what you have, do all that you can, leave the results to God. And the only thing that I'd add to that is for you to do those and to have an amazing day on purpose.
Have an amazing day on purpose. And listen, as you're doing all of that, just be energized. Bring the energy in it. Don't be discouraged when it may not look the way you want it to look. Because remember, you're walking towards your destiny. You're fulfilling purpose. You're making a decision today not to live a good life, but to live a great life. You take care. Have a wonderful week, a wonderful weekend on purpose. See you next time, where Anthony Wallace will be our special guest. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to Living a Life by Design, the journey back to you, and living 365 days of purpose with host Esther Graham. Listen or watch live every second and fourth Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Discover that what is possible is already in you. God designed a phenomenal life for you. Esther helps you ignite that energy behind your personal journey for a deeper joy and peace, living 365 days of purpose. For more information on living a life by design, visit fddwomen.com.